Today's story is Seymour in Michigan, Settling into Camp, written by Carol Craven Bates and illustrated by Kari Wimsatt. If you would like a copy of this book, there's a link for it in the description. Chapter 7. The next business meeting for the camp committee was scheduled for the Monday evening after Toby and his family arrived home from their trip to Hawaii. Mike Barlow opened the meeting by reminding everyone that camp would be starting in just 20 days. As you know, Mr. Jordan and his family have been in Hawaii for the past 2 weeks looking for Seymour. Toby, I hope you have good news to report to us. Toby shook his head no. Sorry to have to tell you this, but the Smatosaurus was nowhere to be found. Katie and I visited 6 of the 8 main islands. Most of the people knew about the Smotter, and as to be expected, some of them liked him and some didn't. It was mainly people in the food businesses that talked negatively about him. Everyone else seemed to love him. Everywhere we went, we heard that he had been there but had left. No one knew when he would be back or where he was now. From what I could gather, it seems as if he cleared out of there about the same time the convention was over. Everyone seemed to think it was the first of the year since they had seen him. We gave a lot of folks our phone number and the number at the church. They promised to call if he shows up anytime soon. Mr. Trace grumbled, "Well, that's a disappointment and a half. What are we supposed to do now?" The preacher stood and cleared his throat to speak. Yes, that is disappointing news. We were all hoping for a different outcome to this situation. We have to come up with a coach before we open our camp, so I've begun to rearrange my schedule and I plan to do the job myself. I realize it won't be as exciting as it would be if Seymour was here, but I'll do the best I can. We don't have any campers over the weekend, so the Wednesday night services are the only ones I'll need someone to fill in for me. I'll ask one of the elders to take my class during that 6 weeks. Christina assured Mr. Barlow that he would do a fine job, and Kari agreed with her, reminding him that everyone enjoyed his preaching and that the Word of God Church was growing by leaps and bounds. Thank you, Miss Darcy and Miss Daniels, for your vote of confidence. The Lord has truly been blessing us. It takes all of us working together, that's for sure. I'm sure you've noticed that the addition onto the back of the cafeteria is complete, and more food is arriving every day. It looks as if we have everything in place for camp to open. Now, is there any other business we need to discuss? When no one voiced any concerns, Mike stated, "Okay, then I guess we will adjourn for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for all your help." The next 2.5 weeks whizzed by in a blur. It seemed like time was speeding up, and before they knew it, the end of May had arrived and opening day for camp was only 2 days away. Even though it was the weekend, Mike Barlow was in his office making final preparations on the lessons he would present as camp coach when he heard a knock on his door. "Come in." To his amazement, Ben Richards entered with Seymour right behind him. Mr. Barlow was thankful that he was seated because he was sure he would have fainted right on the spot if he had been standing. "Well, my goodness, look who's here. I'm almost too flabbergasted for words. Ben, where in the world did you find Seymour?" "Actually, I didn't find him. He found me. I was out at the camp stowing away some of the gear I'll need for next week when the Smotter tapped me on the arm and scared me half to death. I told him he almost gave me a heart attack because I had no idea anyone else was around." The preacher jumped out of his seat and walked over to shake the Smotter's paw. "Seymour, where have you been? We were afraid you wouldn't show up in time for camp on Monday. We even sent Mr. Jordan back to Hawaii to look for you." "What are you talking about? You said I didn't need to be here until the 1st of June, and I'm 2 days early. I gave my word that I'd be here. Why did you doubt?" "Sorry, Seymour, I didn't mean to question your integrity, but how in the world did you keep up with the time and know what month it is? You don't have a calendar like we do." "That's easy. I have several ways of keeping up with the months. First of all, there's the summer solstice, which occurs when the sun reaches its most northerly point directly overhead at the Tropic of Cancer. The summer solstice is the longest day of the year and marks the beginning of summer. The North Star appears at an angle of 23 degrees 27 feet above the horizon. Everybody knows that occurs on June 20th or the 21st, so all I had to do was allow 3 weeks plus travel time to get here on the right date. Besides that, the May apples have been in full bloom for a couple of weeks now, and that reminded me that the time was getting close. May apples have another name. Some call them skunk cabbage. You can tell it's them by the distinctive skunk odor they give off when they're blooming. Did you know that the May apple is also called a mandrake? The Bible tells us that Leah's son, Reuben, found some mandrakes in a wheat field. He took them home to his mama, and she and her sister Rachel nearly had a fight over them. That's when mandrakes were known as love apples. The women would eat the fruit thinking it helped them when they wanted to have a baby. Even if it wasn't for the summer solstice or the May apples, everybody knows June bugs start hatching out in May and early June. That's why they're called June bugs and also called May beetles. Those guys are pretty neat. It takes them at least 2 years to metamorphosize into a beetle bug. The adult beetle eats leaves off of trees and shrubs and deposits their eggs on the ground. The young larvae are large white grubs with brown heads. They burrow into the soil in autumn and stay there 2 years or more feeding on roots. When they come out in May or June, they're adult beetles. Ben looked over at the preacher and grinned. He's got you there, Mike. He seems to know what he's talking about because he's here on time. Then he focused his attention back on the smotter. Okay, that settles that question. Now what about where you've been? We wondered why you would leave the Hawaiian Islands with all their beauty and bounty when winter was coming on. Winter doesn't bother me, but I do prefer warm weather. To keep from getting chilly, I just hang out near the equator. Hawaii isn't the only tropical island, you know. I had to stay clear of the beaches in Honolulu for a while until the people at the luau forgot about me eating all their food, so I decided to swim down to Fiji. The best way to get to Fiji when you're in Hawaii is to go west, traveling right in the middle of the 15th and 30th parallel, and swim straight until you reach the international dateline at 180 degrees longitude, and then turn south and you'll come right to it. It's a good route because the water is warm and the fishing along the way is great. That's the direction I always take when I leave Hawaii going to Fiji. Fiji is a pretty big place. It has a lot more islands in that chain to pick from than Hawaii does. Actually, there's more than 800 scattered around, but a bunch of them are pretty small. And like Hawaii, they are all formed by volcanoes. They have lots of rainforests and tropical weather, so it's a nice place to visit. The problem is they also have a lot of heavy rain and bad storms. Severe storms scare me, so I don't like to stay there too long. After I vacated Fiji, I headed for Peru in South America. Did you know the rivers of Peru are one of only 4 places in the world that has an electric eel that produces a shock of up to 400 to 650 volts? When I see one of them coming, I make a zigzag and let him pass by. I like to visit Peru because they're among the world's leading fishing countries. They have more fish processing plants than anywhere else. I love stopping there because they always give me lots of snacks. If you like sardines and tuna, that's the place to go. They don't just have those tiny little sardines you get in a can. They have some nice ones that are 9 to 12 inches long. By the way, do you know how sardines got their name? Humans first started catching them near Sardinia, an Italian island in the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, I was catching them long before that. They're mighty tasty, so I'm sure glad there's plenty of them. Speaking of tasty, South America also has a funny little bird called a hotazen. Their little ones have claws on their wings, which helps them climb trees until they can fly, but the claws fall off when the bird matures. When they become an adult, they have long, loose feathers on their head. They may be funny looking, but they're mighty good to eat. They taste like chicken. While I was there, I took a swim down the Amazon River because it has lots of yummy things to eat in there, although some of their fish are pretty feisty. I know you've heard of a piranha with their sharp teeth, but have you ever heard of a payara? They eat piranha for breakfast. They have lots of little teeth and two really big ones in the front on the bottom that look like fangs. Those things can grow anywhere between 2 to 6 inches long, and they go up into two cavities in their head and come out holes in their upper jaw so they can close their mouth. They're bad news. Some people call them vampire fish. It's always good to give them a wide berth unless you're really, really hungry. That's when I realized it was almost time for camp to start, so I meandered through Panama, around Jamaica and Cuba, and up the Atlantic. Then I turned west and cut through to the Erie Canal. I could have gone down the St. Lawrence Seaway, but I liked the canal better. You may not know this, but that's not the original canal. It's been redug and rerouted several times. It's really a nice place to swim. The only bad part is that it has 35 locks that you have to go through. A lock brings the water to a higher or lower level depending on which way you're traveling. If there wasn't a boat going through the locks when I needed to, I just got out and walked past the lock and kept on going. Pretty soon I was at Lake Erie. Now that's a pretty big lake, but it's not very deep. I never spend much time there because fishing isn't very good. The water is really choppy from the storms that keep popping up, and that makes the fish afraid to venture out. From Lake Erie, I turned north and swam through Lake Huron. The fishing is much better there, mostly because the water is so clear you can see the fish coming and pick out the one you want long before it gets close enough to be afraid. Last of all, I traveled south down through Lake Michigan. Of all the Great Lakes, Michigan is the only one that is completely in the United States territory. The other 4 are shared by the USA and Canada. I like Lake Michigan because it's nice and deep and has plenty of fish. The only 2 Great Lakes I didn't swim in on this trip was Ontario and Superior, and that was only because I was running out of time. Since I'm so close, I'm hoping I can visit both of them while I'm here this summer, maybe when camp is over. Wow, Seymour, it sounds like you had quite a winter and spring. We sure are glad you had it all figured out and could make it here on time, exclaimed Preacher Mike. When all the greetings and all the questions were satisfied, Mike asked Ben what accommodations had been made for the Smotter. Mr. Richards, is the cabin for Seymour ready for him to occupy? Yes, sir. I'll take him over and show him around right now. He can make himself at home for the weekend, and then we'll be all set for the first week of camp to start on Monday.